Здравствуйте. Я учился с языком 45 лет назад. И я сам все. Therefore, I have to speak in English. I'm sorry. I want to speak about the European crisis, the European Monetary Union crisis. And we have heard about the problem we have with Cyprus at the moment. There's also some Russian money involved and a lot of other things. And I want to pay attention to the question of wages and labor costs, because we, in our analysis, we believe it is very important. And at the moment, most of the people, they always look at the financial sector. We see interest rates go up, and what we do is we look at what's behind, what's the reason why such a crisis would start. If you look carefully in the beginning, then you could see that the financial market pressures was particular on those countries whose relative price competitiveness had worsened continuously since the start of the European Monetary Union. And because of the loss in price competitiveness, these countries started to have current account deficits and higher external debt. It's not a problem in the beginning, but it's a cumulative problem. Now, and after the crisis of 2007-2008, suddenly the international markets looked to these countries. I want to mention Greece, but this also connects the problem of Spain and some other countries. It's not a problem of Ireland. Ireland is completely different story. And because of this huge trade deficits of these countries and of the increase in public debt, the international market suddenly cannot ensure that these countries are able to serve their debt. And immediately they take out the money out of these countries. Now, what we can observe during the start of the European Monetary Union, that we have these divergent trends of labor costs in Euro countries and decrease in the current account balances. And before a country was allowed to enter the European Monetary Union, it had to show that its inflation rate is very much in line with the general inflation rate in the European Monetary Union. Let's say something around 2%. But after entrance of inside the European Monetary Union, the single inflation rate did not play a role anymore. The ECB only looked at the overall inflation rate in the euro area and not at the inflation rate in the different countries. And here we had huge differences between the countries. And this is one of the construction problems of the European Monetary Union. In the Maastricht Treaty, inflation rate differentials don't play any role. We have only deficit criteria of 3% or debt criteria of 16% of GDP, but nobody mentioned differential inflation rates. But if you look at the reason behind an increase or worsening in competitiveness, you see that it's the price development which is different between the European countries. And these differences also lead to foreign trade imbalances. Now, we have been used in Western Europe that countries like Italy, Spain, or Greece, in the past, they always had higher wages, higher inflation rates, and then after, let's say, 5 to 7 years, there was a huge depreciation of the currency, because in these 5 years they lost so much in competitiveness, and then the market corrected. And after 5 years, the whole story started again. worked in a way, in such a way. But now, in the European Monetary Union, there is no normal exchange rate anymore existing between the countries. And now, the problem is, now for convergence, you need a real adjustment, economic adjustment. So that means that is much more difficult than the change in exchange rate before. Now, if you want to build up a monetary union, you have to think about how to organize it. And for example, we have a European, we have the ECB, and the ECB from the beginning said that it would tolerate an inflation rate of, let's say, up to 2%. And this is a guidance for all member countries for its own wage policy or wage increases. That does not mean that each country should have the same wage increase like the other. But if a country which is able to increase its productivity much more than other countries, such a country would have much higher wage increases like other countries. So you can have a convergence in the level of income but between the countries, but only to the extent that you are able to increase your productivity. If you don't follow such a rule, you will have a real appreciation, which, let's say, if it's only small for a few years, it doesn't matter. But if it's accumulated over 15 years, you have a problem. Now, we never had such a rule for the European Monetary Union. And now we have to pay the price for neglecting such a fundamental. It's a constraint, in a way. And unit labor cost is one of the major driving force for price development. Of course, we have other components like, let's say, oil price. Russia benefits from higher oil price, I know. But an oil price or energy price increase or increase in raw materials, this affects all countries. So this is a common. It does not make a big difference between different countries. But the development of the unit labor cost between countries, this produces a difference in price competitiveness. Now what I want to show with some slides is the development in the European Monetary Union. Now, if you look at labor cost, you have different channels of impact. Of course, the price competitiveness is one impact. But labor cost at the same time is a demand variable, because higher labor costs, higher wages, people can consume more if they have higher wages. As a consequence, with higher wages, you import more because you have a higher internal demand, you import more, and this comes on top of the worsening of the price competitiveness. That makes it even worse. And we have to accept that to achieve external stability, labor cost must follow such a path of, let's say, 2% inflation target of the ECB plus the medium-term productivity trend of each country. Now, if you look at the data, you see that some countries have labor cost development which are much above the European average, or the 2% line, and other countries, and there is only one country which really is the extreme case, it's Germany, and in Germany labor cost increased only slightly over the last 14 years. Now I want to show you some slides. Here you see the labor cost per hour in the private sector. I'm sorry, it's 2010. We already have 2011 available. The picture is the same. You see, in a way, Germany has high labor costs. It's 29 euros per hour. And the average in Europe is much lower. And you see again countries like Spain or Greece on the lower part of the picture. And you don't think it is a problem. But it is a problem. If you look now on the second page, the second picture, you see the increase in Germany. The average annual increase was just 1.7%. And in Europe, it was around 3.3. And you see countries like Spain, Ireland, they have much higher, Hungary, Czech Republic, much higher increases. Some of the countries do have the productivity, so they can do it. Other countries don't have the productivity increase. In the manufacturing sector, it's more or less the same picture. And you also see in the manufacturing sector, Germany is a country with the lowest increase in wages. Now, you can imagine, behind such a wage increase of 1.8%, and we have an inflation rate which is more or less the same, there was no real income increase for the people who work. The workers didn't benefit from the growth of the last 15 years. No benefit at all. Now, in the slides, I have also countries which are not part of the European Monetary Union. UK, Sweden, Czech Republic. And you can see that, of course, for the price competitiveness for countries outside the European Monetary Union, the exchange and development matters. Now, if you look at the development over, let's say, 12 years here, then you see that Germany did have the lowest compensation of employees. Very, very low, much below the average of the European Union. And on the right-hand side, you see countries like Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Italy. All these countries, or Portugal, all these countries did have increase in wages which had been above the European Monetary Union, above the average. And these prices, these trends in wage increases, this is partly, or to major part, a problem of their present situation. Now I have to be a bit faster because I have only 2.5 minutes left. Here you see the productivity increases. And here you look, if you see Poland on the right hand side, it's a black line. You see Poland did have high wage increases, but at the same time they experienced a very high productivity increase. And then you can do it. If you have high productivity increase, high wage increases are allowed. But if you look at countries like Greece or Italy, Greece came down. Compared to the wage increases, Greece had never been good. The wage increases had been much more than productivity increase. And they came back to EU average, and Italy did not show any productivity increase at all. The German productivity increase was just a bit above average. Now, Germany is not the winner of the game. It loses. Because if you look at the employment development in Germany, Germany did have the lowest employment development. Much lower than each other country, besides Portugal.
In ours world.
In ours world. Just a moment, yeah. And now the unit labor cost trend. You see unit labor cost in Germany very, very low. And the other countries did have higher. And Germany was much below the EMU average. This is for the manufacturing sector. Now, look at real GDP. Germany did have, over a period of 11 years, beside Italy and Portugal, the lowest growth rate in Europe. The lowest growth rate. No. It's just the last 2 few years we are a bit better, but not before. But because of this increase in the current account imbalances, Germany is one of these countries with a huge surplus, and a big part of the surplus is against European neighbors. And then we have the countries like Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, which have accumulated its trade deficits, and which are now in a big trouble with correcting their current account balances. And now this is very difficult to solve. Last slide. If we build up such a formula inside the European Monetary Union, that countries have to follow a rule, not doing a beggar my neighbor policy. This is also the case for countries which have labor cost increases which are below the target. It's not only to be it's not allowed to be above the target, but should not be below the target. So Germany is one of the countries, is the country, the major country, which did not follow such a rule. So it's not only the fault of Greece, Spain, or whatever. It's the fault also of Germany of neglecting such a basic fundamental rule. And now, during the last 2 years, we have a bit higher wage increases, but we need another 15 years if we follow such a trend until we have a conversion, and that's a long time. Thank you.
Okay, very clear picture on the reason for the euro crisis. So, take your questions.
Два вопроса. Вот это похоже на регионы России. Один богатый регион, другой бедный. Это одна из проблем, которая ведет к дезинтеграции. Вот подобная ситуация в Евросоюзе, с вашей точки зрения, ведет к распаду Евросоюза? Или есть какой-то иной выход?
More questions?
Господин Рудольф, скажите, последние исследования показывают, что инфляция в пределах определенных не зависит ни от роста государственных расходов, нет не то что причинно-следственной, а даже корреляционной зависимости, ни от роста денежной массы и не является ли данная ситуация Евросоюз заложником долго внедряемого неправильного мира по источникам инфляции. В данной ситуации, что источником инфляции является рост заработной платы.
I can imagine that in any economy there are different regions with different rates.
You have microphone.
I'm sorry.
I got it from
because it was the question to you.
I guess that in any larger country there are different rates of inflation in different regions. In the US or in Russia, for instance. Why does it cause such a big problem in the European Union? Is it not because the banking system is not integrated enough, so the financing of these differences are not working properly, and because countries are still, because of their sovereign debt, considered as different entities? In a really integrated economy, different rates of inflation would not matter that much.
Okay. Just answer the question from the very end. Michael Lauderstedt is right. We have a few differences between the European Monetary Union and countries like Russia or the United States. In these countries, even you have big difference between regions, you have two advantages. First advantage is that you have a common fiscal policy. You have a responsibility of the parliament and of the fiscal policy for the whole region. Even you have differences in the levels of employment or in the level of income inside the region. And with regard to the outside of the country, there is a sovereignty of debt, you're right. So the country itself is also always responsible for the debt which had been created inside the country. So there is $1, and so America is responsible for every bond which had been issued in dollar. But in the European Monetary Union it's different, because who is responsible for the debt of the Greek state or of the Irish state? We never thought about solving such a problem in advance. So this is a fundamental problem, that we are not a political unity in a way. We have a currency union, and that's not enough. Now, your question had been with regard to sources of inflation. Of course, we have different sources of inflation. Unit labor costs are one important. Oil price increases are another. Then we have, for example, housing bubbles. The housing price bubbles. And the crisis in 2007, 2008 started in America because of the housing price bubble just came to an end. Now, this is also something which is a problem inside the European Monetary Union. If you had been a private household in Spain and you had a common interest rate in the European Monetary Union, and you had a wage increase, yearly wage increase, which was exactly the same like the interest rate, then if you're a household, then you buy a house, you build a house, because you have no real interest rate cost. The wage increase of next year will pay the interest rate. That makes it so the housing bubble in Spain was also partly due to the higher wages, high inflation rate, but interest rates which had been fixed in Frankfurt by the ECB. In Germany, it was the other way around. No wage increase and price increases. That means people could not afford buying a house anymore in Germany, because the real interest rate burden on the households had been too high. So, if you have one interest rate on different wage increases, you generate a bubble by definition, and it worked like that. But each bubble, at the very end, it bursts. And then you need a time of 5 to 7 years to adjust. That's a long time. And Spain and all these countries now need a long time of adjustment. There is another question, of course, of money supply, if there's too much money supply for inflation rates. But even now, in a time of high money supply, the future indicators for inflation rate don't show any sign. So I doubt that. There was one last question with regard to if Russia has the same problem because you have this different development in the regions. No, I think fortunately you don't have the problem we do have in the European Monetary Union, because you have one ruble and you don't have different currencies in your regions. You have to look at the reason for your divergence inside the region. And public policy can do something against the divergence inside Russia. But fortunately, it is not connected with our problem we have in the European Monetary Union. Thank you.
Okay. One more question, then.
Micro.
Скажите, пожалуйста, Есть ли у вас исследование определения алгоритма стоимости рабочей силы в Еврозоне и в России? Алгоритмы определения стоимости рабочей силы в России и в Еврозоне. Совпадают, не совпадают?
What I use is data from Eurostat. Eurostat is the statistical office of all the European countries, and they started to produce this statistics around 7 years ago. And the methodology is exactly the same in all neighboring countries. In all European countries, exactly the same methodology. Only because of the same methodology in calculating labor cost, we are able to compare it. Until 7 years ago, it was not possible to make a good analysis between European countries, but now we can do it. I don't know how labor costs are collected and in Russia. I can't do it.
A very short question. I come from Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, and you mentioned that labor cost increased in the European area, particularly after the international crisis. My question is, what's the source of labor cost increase? Because in China, we also increased labor cost after the financial crisis, but it's related to the macro policy, like the minimum wage or other reasons. So, what's the special reason, or I mean, it's related to labor productivity or something like that? Thank you.
What I can say is that in general, in the European Monetary Union, we did have an increase in labor costs, which was absolutely in line with the ECB target of 2%. Inflation rate in the Eurozone increased exactly by 2% if you look over average of 13, 14 years. Perfect, absolutely perfect. But behind the 2%, we did have countries who had wage increases and inflation rates which had been twice as much, and countries like Germany which had been much below. If this would switch from year to year, it wouldn't matter. But it's the same country which had wage increases over 10, 12 years, which had been much above the 2% line, and countries which had been always below Germany. And then you have this accumulated problem, and then you have this sharp difference between competitiveness. That is the problem. But I can't say anything about China. Very bad.
Okay. One final remark from my side. And we were talking on the reasons for the euro crisis and looking into the differences in wages. So one conclusion of this would be to solve that problem, we need a sort of uniform wage policy in this currency area. Something like a formula where you link productivity increase with inflation rate, something like that. But if you have such a formula, then you take one historical actor from the labor market out. That is trade unions. Trade unions claim in most countries to be the actor in determining wages. If we need a uniform wage policy, then we need a uniform labor movement, because national trade unions will be very difficult for them to handle it. So when we talk of the solution, the way out from this crisis, we are into more problems. So there's much thing to think again. So now we move to the next speaker. I hand over.